Jacobean sense, is meant only as a rough analogy to the reaction among contemporary literati to Dylan's Nobel Prize. Shakespeare's art, though recognized as remarkable in his time, was by no means held to the same standard as traditional forms of poetry, not even by Shakespeare himself, incidentally, who only published his sonnets and conventional poetry, never his plays, not least because he didn't own them. Poets laboring to imitate the Virgilian rota, wheel, of pastoral, Georgic, and epic poetry garnered genuine esteem, while playwrights, though they wrote in blank verse, rarely, if ever, published their plays and therefore were never read, per se. Just as they performed on the fringes of the city, in the so-called liberties, they also inhabited a literary no-man's land. To give the Nobel Prize to a Jacobean playwright would be the equivalent, in our day, to giving it, well, to a rock star. Dylan's distinction lies in his capacity to merge performative virtuosity with a syncretic genius unlike any in contemporary poetry, let alone among folk or rock composers. The controversy and subsequent literary justifications surrounding Dylan's prize are ultimately moot arguments, a storm in a teacup. He is an artist by any measure, and he's a literary artist too, if of a different mold. Why bother defining what Dylan long ago redefined for himself? If, in his Nobel speech, he asks now whether his songs are literature, that is probably because the literature he sees as fundamental to his formation is drawn from the traditional school curriculum, Homer, Melville, Remarque, and his attitude toward it is both humble and maybe even a bit banal. Yet, without rejecting those influences, which evidently he carried along from his school days, Dylan absorbed, re-envisioned, and wrote himself into the tradition. Through the sheer force of his creativity, he translated the traditional American poetic genius from the page to the rock stage. Although Dylan's literary art originated not in the mainstream but in the tributary current of American blues and folk, that unlikely source became, I can't help it if I'm lucky, a flood. And if today we're all down in the flood, it's because Bob Dylan brought us here. Yet, to begin in the right mode, I will invoke a fundamental disclaimer. Dylan's songs, his performances, his recordings, none of this work exists primarily on the page. Every word we read rings in our mind with what Christopher Ricks called that voice that can't be ignored and that ignores nothing. As Dylan himself has so often pointed out, he too is a poet of the stage. His language lives in the delivery, his word, even if his 2017 gallery exhibition, Mondo Scripto, might suggest that he also recognizes that his words have authority on the page. For most of his career, however, Dylan has avoided being judged among traditional poets of the page. For example, on a typescript draft of the liner notes for World Gone Wrong, "So here's what these songs mean to me," sort of, there's a bit of marginalia written neatly in Dylan's hand in blue ink. Billy Joel visited me backstage in Milan recently and asked why there weren't notes to my records anymore. It seems that self-appointed connoisseurs of modern and my music might have a hard time with this set of songs, World Gone Wrong, who have attempted to take my music apart in hopes to see hidden meaning explaining away the intent in seemingly endless monologue, as if the whole story isn't in the delivery. But that isn't the whole story, and never will be. In preparing this book, I spent time at the Bob Dylan Archive in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The archive is new and large and will change the way we approach Dylan studies in the future, as much in terms of Dylan's compositional method as of his biography. I pored through box after box of isolated lyrics and drafts of entire songs, including many fascinating stanzas that never saw the light of day. One of my favorites is an early draft of the album Oh Mercy's Shooting Star, 1989, handwritten on pinkish,